Good evening and welcome to a regularly scheduled meeting of the Darien Zoning Board of Appeals. I ask that if you are not speaking on an application that you mute your microphone. We've had some issues with people not being able to be heard. Fred, if you can assist where possible in muting people that aren't speaking, that would be great. We're going to follow the agenda as posted, and with that, we generally do deliberations the night of the hearing. You're more than welcome to stay around for the deliberations. We ask that you not speak as we can't have any additional public comment during the deliberations. With that being said, we will go ahead and open tonight's meeting with the continuation of calendar number 15 from 2020. This is the 7-Eleven application that I think a lot of you are aware of. I know Attorney Suchins, you're here to speak on that application. I would ask you, since we spent 3 hours last meeting on this application, and I know all of that time wasn't expended by you, but I would like to try and keep the comments tonight brief. I think we've heard a tremendous amount on the location, but very little on the signage and the hardship for variance. So I would like you to address those items. And then if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak, we'll give everyone an opportunity to speak as well. Go ahead.
Certainly. Amy Suchins, attorney for 7-Eleven. Good evening, everyone. So we had, as you noted, Mr. Chairman, we were here for two reasons. At the last meeting, given the length of the discussion with Mr. Galante, our traffic engineer, and the public, we never got to the signage. And then we also had not yet received the comments from the police commission. They were issued I think shortly after, maybe a day or two after your last meeting. So Jason Adams, our traffic engineer, is here. He has just a couple of minutes on a couple of key points that we want to rebut on the police commission report and clarify those numbers. So with that, I'd like to have Jason talk about those items so we can sort of wrap up that portion. And then I'm happy to talk about signage.
Good evening. Is it possible for me to share my screen? Can everyone see that? Excellent. Well, good evening. For the record, Jason Adams with McMahon Associates. We are the traffic engineer on the project here. I want to just take you through our response to the local traffic authority letter that we received. There are three primary points within that letter. I'll just hit those quickly, and then happy to go into as much detail as you would like, but I'll try to keep things brief in the interest of time. The number one point in the local traffic authority letter is that the project would add a significant level of traffic to area roadways and nearby intersections. We do not feel this to be the case. I have a couple slides set up to just walk you through the actual numbers of trips that we would expect to see as part of this project. As you may remember, all of the data presented in our study has been reviewed and agreed upon with your peer reviewer. So we feel as though it's the best set of numbers possible, and I'll just take you quickly through that so as to not get into too many numbers, but again, if you have questions, happy to answer those. The next point within the letter talks about the impacts of the project to exit 13, the southbound ramps and their connection to Boston Post Road. We do not feel as though this project would cause significant queuing issues at both the exit 13 southbound ramp and exit 13 southbound extension area. I believe I went over this in the last hearing, but Connecticut DOT has recently done roadway work at this location, so they have recently reviewed it. I know this has come up somewhat in some of the staff questions that we received. I could touch upon that in a little bit greater detail. in just a couple minutes. But overall, the project analysis that we have run shows that the queuing at those movements would increase 1 to 2 vehicles during the peak hour. So we don't feel as though that qualifies as significant queuing issues, and certainly this project would not be the cause of queuing issues at that location. And then there was questions about the Saturday trip generation data. I have some numbers just to present back to the group here. But overall, there are fewer additional project trips at the site during Saturday than during the weekday morning or weekday afternoon. So the total number is similar, but because the Duchess generates more vehicle trips today, there are actually fewer additional trips related to this project. Speaking to the AM peak hour, what our numbers show is that at the site driveway, there are a total of 71 new additional entering vehicles. The vehicle trips at the site driveway are comprised of new trips, which is a brand new vehicle to the area, and pass-by trips, which are vehicles that are already traveling past the site. So 71 additional entering vehicles are new, 88 of those, 88 total. The local traffic authority was summing them up and giving a number of 143. So I just wanted to be clear that that's 71 entering and 72 exiting, which is about just over 1 new vehicle per minute during that hour. And again, we do not feel that's a significant number of vehicle trips associated with the project. Similarly, in the PM peak hour, fewer additional trips, 57 new entering, 62 new exiting, right around, again, 1 vehicle per minute, in addition to what is already at the site. And during Saturday peak hour, the data shows 25 new entering vehicles and 30 new exiting vehicles. So about 1 new vehicle every 2 minutes. And once again, we don't feel as though this represents a significant additional traffic as part of this project. I've prepared a couple slides here. I know there's a lot of numbers, so I don't really care to get into the specifics, but I have taken all the numbers within our report and placed them just so that we can see exactly how many vehicles are expected because of this project at the movements around the site. So happy to go through that, but I'll just kind of gloss through it here. We have this presented for both the weekday morning and the weekday afternoon. But the bottom line is that at movements such as coming off of I-95, we're really looking at about 14 additional vehicles in the weekday afternoon peak hour coming off of 95 as a result of this project. So a vehicle every approximately 4 minutes. Again, we don't feel that represents a significant increase. And just speaking to the interchange itself, as is noted in the staff questions that we received, this location at exit 13 in Boston Post Road was previously reviewed by Connecticut DOT. I believe it was in the 1990s, and the notes state that Darien residents objected to a reconfiguration of this intersection. Work was completed by Connecticut DOT in the summer of 2020. That resulted in new signal equipment at the signal that serves this interchange, as well as the new crosswalk between the project site and Birch Road. Typically, Connecticut DOT, when they're doing a project, they would look at the overall interchange, which indicates to us that the Connecticut DOT is comfortable with the configuration of this interchange. And certainly the interchange does include what we would consider to be appropriate signage. This picture here on screen is for the vehicle coming off of the exit 13 southbound ramp. Looking back towards the site right here, you can clearly see do not enter signs on both sides of the roadway. Of course, we understand that there have been reports of vehicles turning the wrong way here, but the goal for Connecticut DOT, and this is their interchange, is to appropriately design this location. We would consider this to have been appropriately designed. It's not to say that someone isn't going to violate the signage. That's always the case, but The goal is to design it appropriately. The do not enter signs here represent that that is appropriately designed, and overall, this interchange is under the purview of the Connecticut DOT, and therefore it is their jurisdiction, and they have recently reviewed that. So we feel as though they are comfortable with this. And with that being just a quick overview, in the interest of time, I'd be happy to answer questions that you may have.
Okay, thanks. If I can jump in here, please, Mr. Chairman. Jason, appreciate your comments. You know, you have referenced the Connecticut DOT improvements that have occurred at this interchange, except some people in town, quite frankly, I happen to be one of them, don't think that those improvements have accomplished their goal. The reason is because when you come off exit 13 going southbound, you cross the post road, okay, the 2 lanes of traffic, and then you've got an area or a site that's only about maybe 40 feet. I think everyone agrees it fits 2 cars. That's fine. And the 2 cars normally side by side and then 2 cars behind them, it can quickly back up, okay? Because once you put a 3rd car there, it's a real problem. Additionally, as soon as you turn left, the 2 lanes now going towards Darien Center are no longer 2 lanes. 1 lane now goes to the on-ramp to exit 13. So now you have 2 lanes going left. So when you cross over your picture, so going towards Norwalk, you cross over the post road going that way. Now you're in that 50-foot area. When you turn left, you need to quickly move to your right. This is a problem now. And if you increase traffic, and you know, I've heard all kinds of numbers, I've read everything, I'm fully aware of everybody's different positions, but it's a problem. I'm not really all too sure why they did that. I'm sure they have their reasons. I'm not in that business. I respect your experience and your profession, but I think it's a real problem, just as it is now, to cross over, get on the post road towards Darien Center, and then quickly move over to the right so you're not all of a sudden getting back on the highway. That's a real concern of mine. I don't even like the way it is now, let alone adding 1 more vehicle every 4 minutes, if in fact we can even agree to that.
Mr. Williams, I think the issue is that this is a DOT designed intersection. It's controlled by them. It's for the highway. So, you know, as Jason said, I think we're adding a very minimal amount of traffic to this. DOT just reviewed it, and as you saw in the staff report, which was frankly helpful for us too, that the last time DOT tried to look at this, the residents objected. So, you know, I think we are, you know, as Jason said, the intersection in DOT's opinion functions correctly, functions adequately, and ultimately it's a state road with an access on, you know, from a state highway. We could propose, or the town could propose anything it wants, but it's ultimately DOT's call. That's the challenge here, is that you know, we're adding, frankly, what we believe to be minimal traffic at that intersection, you know, as Jason numbers report, but you know, how it's configured and stuff is really, you know, DOT Newington's decision.
I understand your comment. However, my question to DOT would be, when they did this study on changing the lanes and how they are directed back onto the highway vis-a-vis towards Darien Center, did they realize that a 7-Eleven and increased traffic was going to be there? I don't think so. I think their study would have been a little bit different, maybe not a lot, but it certainly would have been different given the increased traffic volume if a 7-Eleven or a similar use, I don't mean to point out 7-Eleven, I'm only saying an increased traffic condition, and we can argue all night long about how much that increased traffic is going to be, but certainly there's going to be increased traffic. And I wonder if DOT really knew that the uses were going to change around there.
Right.
And
So
if they had
actually, I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
I apologize. No, I wonder if they would have come up with the same lane solution given increased traffic in the future, which is what we have going on now.
Yeah.
And actually, I can have Jason talk to that. It was a question that he and I had discussed, if there was a different use here, whether it was 7-Eleven or something else. So I'll turn that over to Jason.
Yeah, and Mr. Williams, that is a consideration of DOT when they're looking at a study. They don't look to solve for the existing year. They typically would project the volumes out, just like we did in our report, to a future year in order to understand as best as possible. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball that is guaranteeing a certain number of vehicles turn a certain way at a certain time, but as best as possible, they would project growth in the area, growth along Boston Post Road, growth along with different developments, maybe not specifically a 7-Eleven, but certainly growth in general. And that growth would capture the increase associated with a 7-Eleven at this location. 10 or 15 additional trips during an hour would be captured in that growth. So, they never have the ability to solve for one specific development's specific impact at a location. They look instead at the entire available information and whether they thought that this site was going to be redeveloped or something down the road, or maybe a couple project sites down the road. They take that information so that the volumes are projected forward. It's not as though they're just using today's traffic volumes when they look at their studies. And therefore, we do conclude that a project such as 7-Eleven fits within the data that would have been used by Connecticut DOT for a project like this. And I would not think that 10 or 15 additional vehicles over the course of an hour would in and of itself require a change in lane configuration or operation of this interchange. It's not to say that there aren't other available ways that you could process vehicles at this location. I mean, as has been stated at the staff questions and what I just went over, it has been looked at by Connecticut DOT, but for whatever reason, it didn't meet local desire lines at that time. And that's not to say that it can't change again in the future, but that's kind of where we are as a Connecticut DOT has looked at it, and it's not about this 7-Eleven project.
Mr. Adams, if I could ask a question, and Ms. Sushin, did you guys refer to the new police report that we just got in from January 26th? Did you read their conclusions about that location?
Yeah, and that was, sorry. That was part of Jason's response.
I think the DOT messed this up. I understand they rubber stamped it and they went through their process, but it's a disaster. Having that one committed lane to get on the highway right there is a potential recipe for disaster there. I'm a really aggressive driver. I'm pretty good about getting over, and I'm familiar with that exit. So it does concern me that the police department also has those concerns. So I'm going to stop talking and let you guys talk about the police report.
Right, and I did try to speak to that. Again, we understand that there are some complicated pieces to this interchange, right? That's your experiences have been heard throughout this process. The point that we object to within the police report is that this 7-Eleven project is the cause of those issues. We do not believe that this 7-Eleven project is the cause of issues that you yourself were just speaking to. You experienced something today. That this 7-Eleven, we maintain, is just not going to make that significantly worse. There's only going to be another vehicle every 4 minutes, which you as a driver wouldn't even perceive over the course of all of the trips you might make in this area. You wouldn't notice that there's another vehicle every 4 minutes at a location like this. So this project, we feel, fits well within the area of Darien. And that's our primary point here, is that this project is not increasing, or is not causing queuing. If there's queuing there, there's queuing there.
So what happens if it does? Let's say that we approve this project and and it's a huge disaster, and it turns out that there is a big queuing problem and there are more accidents. Then what happens? Does the DOT come back in and adjust the situation, add lighting, add lanes? I mean, what can even be done there if we make a mistake here?
I mean, I guess first of all, that I don't think that you would ever be able to figure out exactly what the cause of, if there was 2 additional crashes in the next couple months than there have been in the previous couple months, you wouldn't exactly know why those crashes happened, right? So DOT is typically consistently monitoring their roadway system such that if there are spikes in the number of crashes, they do investigate. And I would expect that the changes that they made in the signal equipment, the addition of the crosswalk next to Birch Road, were the result of something. And I don't know what that is, right? Connecticut DOT doesn't publicize exactly every decision they make. Some of it may be because a local entity was asking them to do something. Some of it may be their own data review. If there happened to be an uptick in crashes at this location, whether it be because of more vehicles, or if this project were to not move forward and it just happened, right, that there were more crashes, Connecticut DOT at some point, or the town can certainly ask for Connecticut DOT to pursue improvements. It's a whole process about how money is used, state funding, and the schedule of projects. I mean, it's not something that you can like put your finger on. But certainly, if there were an uptick in crashes, Connecticut DOT would be expected to come in and solve that. The last thing that they want is unsafe conditions.
So a couple
Chief.
follow-up questions. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
I just, that statement that you can't categorize what the cause of the traffic is just doesn't sit right with me. So if you go down to Chick-fil-A on a Saturday, you can clearly see what the cause of the traffic is. It is a backup because of poorly designed traffic study that, DOT looked at that intersection, right? They put lights there. They did everything that you're supposed to do to make the traffic flow work. It doesn't. So I think what's clear is that traffic studies can be wrong. And we've got a lot of testimony on both sides of this, but the people who live here and the people who routinely use that intersection are speaking out saying, hey, it's unsafe as it is, and you want to add to that. You want to make it worse. It's not saying that it's only going to be 1 to 2 cars. Yeah, it's going to be 1 to 2 cars. That's 1 to 2 more accidents. That's a safety issue for our town. So I patently disagree with that. The DOT work that you're talking about is work on the entrance, not the exit. And I agree with the sentiment of my board members. It made that a much more dangerous intersection. Mr. Fullington, if you want to proceed.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to raise a couple things on what you just said, and particularly because it comes up in some of the public comments. I don't think I can state as strongly enough that we truly disagree with this analysis or comparison to the Chick-fil-A. I think as Mr. Galante and Mr. Adams both testified at the last hearing, not only is that a completely different type of establishment, it's a fast food restaurant, and it has a drive-through, but I also think something that frankly none of us even sitting here a year ago could have envisioned is that likely no small part of the traffic backup that you're seeing right now is because that Chick-fil-A is one of 11 Chick-fil-A's in the state. It's the only one around here, and the dining room is closed. So anybody who wants to go to a Chick-fil-A in the state of Connecticut has no option but to go through the drive-through. So if you take some of those vehicles and you put them in the parking lot, you would have a different experience. Now, that's not to say that there might be issues with respect to how Chick-fil-A functions because it's a busy restaurant, but I think there are some very fundamental use differences, not only with Chick-fil-A itself, but the mere comparison between a gas station, which there are certainly plenty in the vicinity, and I don't think anybody here has said that they're experiencing extensive waits to get gas that cause backup here in town, but also just the difference between, the type of use that a gas station is and a restaurant that has, frankly, a regional draw.
If I may interject, Mr. Chair. Couple of things. The Chick-fil-A site, I think, is a very fair comparison to speak, number one. Number two, there are 2 drive-through lanes, 2 separate drive-throughs at Chick-fil-A, plus there's curbside pickup. And I mentioned last week or last meeting, they have four traffic control, I don't know if they're police, but 4 traffic control people on site. Additionally, you continue to refer to the use on this site as a gas station. Fair enough. However, there are 2 other uses, one of which has been discussed at some mild length of a convenience store, a rather large convenience store. But the other use that has never, to the best of my recollection, even been mentioned is the Roost use. I said that right? Roost use, yes. Of the site. So there are 3 different uses on this site. It's not just a gas station. So to refer to it that way, I think is patently unfair. There are 2 other uses here. It's a 3-use site.
They are accessory uses, and we have been very clear in our application materials to planning and zoning, and I'm happy to reiterate it here, that we have committed to P&Z that like all of the other gas stations that have accessory retail use in Darien, including a number of the gas stations in the immediate vicinity and over on Norotan Avenue, that the gas station will remain the primary use, and the quick service Roost and convenience store are accessory and cannot be operated independently of the gas station. That's a condition that's in a number of, as I said, in a number of the other gas station approvals in town, and something that we agreed with P&Z would be an acceptable condition of approval to us. So again, I think the fundamental difference is that if you look at a Chick-fil-A that's between 4,000 and 5,000 square feet of just fast food and a drive-through, it's fundamentally different than the type of use that is heavily a pass-by use. You know, most people aren't making a special trip to get gas. They are often stopping to get gas on the way to other errands. You know, is it perfectly possible that somebody in Darien would stop, get gas at 7-Eleven before they went and got in line at Chick-fil-A? Absolutely. And I think that's the evidence of how fundamentally different these 2 uses are. That you know, you've probably been to a Cumberland Farms somewhere in Connecticut, I'm going to guess. This is, you know, it's a modern day gas station has more than just gas. And so what we are doing is, as I said, you know, really more in the P&Z jurisdiction, but our regulation amendments and everything are designed to make, you know, to modernize Darien's automotive service use regulations to be consistent with 2021 and the universe that is gas stations. And it doesn't apply to just to our site. It applies to the other stations. So the Mobil across the street or the Shell on Norotan Avenue would also benefit from the regulation amendments that we proposed. So I just think that the you know, the nature of the use, even though what we have under your regulations are accessory use, are just fundamentally different than Chick-fil-A or Shake Shack or Starbucks. They're just very different uses.
Amy, how good is this chicken?
Hang on, please. I just want to back that. I appreciate your comments. First of all, frankly, I've never been to a Cumberland Farms, but I have been to a Wawa, and I can tell you that was a disaster. And with regard to exiting and entering and parking, and it was crazy. I've never been to a Wawa before, but my daughter lived down the street from a Wawa, and I've never seen anything like that. I'm not familiar with Roost, and I don't. And if anybody on here can tell me that the popularity of Roost, whatever they serve, I obviously it must be chicken. We can't judge the popularity of Roost. What happens if the popularity of Roost hits anywhere near that of Chick-fil-A, which I hope their business does? But what happens if all of a sudden it takes off? Now your accessory use is all of a sudden not really an accessory use because you're going there to get a chicken sandwich, I guess. And furthermore, quite frankly, I live in Norotan next to the Shell station here, and I go to the Shell station all the time. I have never bought gas there. I go there almost every morning for my coffee. I've never bought gas there, never. I'm just
Yeah,
saying, man.
They say this is a chicken worth crossing the road for. I think you're going to get a lot of traffic at this place, but I appreciate your comments.
Understood. And I think the fundamental comment that we've heard from the public is that they seem to think we're going to be, this is going to be a draw, a regional draw. That's not, how this is designed. It's, it's not Wawa. I think that came up. I apologize. I can't remember whether the Wawa discussion came up at your last meeting or at one of the P&Z meetings between Mr. Galante and Mr. Adams, but Wawa, much like Chick-fil-A, is its own distinct animal in other states. And so I think those are, again, it's a much larger and broader, and I've been to a very large Wawa in New Jersey. It's quite substantially larger than the building we're proposing here, vastly greater offerings, that kind of thing. So I think the scale is fundamentally different, just like, a small area that we're going to have for for the Roost counter and some very modest seating along the window is substantially different than a 4,000 to 5,000 square foot Chick-fil-A. So
I think we can agree to disagree on that one. Mr. Fullington, did you have some comments?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to start by saying for the record that this is the fourth public hearing on this matter, and there's been some transition in the board during that period. And I wanted to say for the record that while I was not present for the September 16th public hearing, I've reviewed the online video of it, the entire video. And for the October 14th hearing, while I was not a part of the panel that was active at that time, I did observe live that hearing, and I've reviewed and read all the documents that have been submitted. So I just wanted to say that for the record. The other two public hearings, last time and this one, obviously, I'm participating in.
right.
So just a couple of quick questions for Jason in relation to the presentation you just gave and the police commission's letter/report. Obviously, there's a disagreement between your and the applicant's view and the police commission's view. And their view is that this project, if developed, would significantly increase the level of traffic and that would cause significant queuing problems. And you disagree that it would significantly increase traffic or cause significant queuing problems. And I'm just curious about the nature of that disagreement. In other words, do they disagree with your analysis about the numbers, or is it just a disagreement about what the word significant means?
My understanding, and I haven't been part of any meetings with the local traffic authority, so I don't mean to represent words that were actually said in that. I understand that the town's peer reviewer, Mr. Galante, was part of those conversations, but even during our Planning and Zoning Commission hearing last week, I believe that the local traffic authority used the word untenable. Mr. Galante testified that was not his word choice, as in, I think that there is a certain level of interpretation by the local traffic authority about the numbers presented in our study. So again, I don't mean to speak for their interpretation of the numbers. I can only give you my interpretation of the numbers. My understanding is that there is not a disagreement in the numbers themselves. Mr. Galante has testified both here in the ZBA as well as in planning and zoning that they are in agreement technically with the numbers that we have presented. There has been a number of iterations back and forth between our project team and Mr. Galante representing the town. So I don't feel as though the numbers are in question on any level with Mr. Galante, and therefore there wasn't any mention in the local traffic authority about not agreeing with the numbers themselves. I do believe that the nature of the disagreement is in the definition or interpretation of the word significant.
And is that word significant a legally defined word in traffic regulations, traffic interpretation documents, or is it an opinion based on various experts and their experience and what they believe would be, in their estimation, significant?
Right, more the latter, for sure, more the latter. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I have to apply what we call in the industry engineering judgment. So I am using my professional licensure to evaluate a set of data as best I can, following the methodology of the Connecticut DOT, methodology that has been reviewed by your peer reviewer, Mr. Galante. In my interpretation, an additional vehicle every minute is not a significant increase in traffic on a road system such as Boston Post Road that carries 1,500 vehicles an hour. My interpretation is that an additional vehicle length of queue is not a cause of queuing issues, and my interpretation is that over the course of an hour, if you have an additional vehicle every 4 minutes at a particular movement, that is not a significant increase to that movement. So that's my take. Again, I can't speak for the interpretation of someone else, but I look to make sure that the vehicle trips generated by a project would not result in direct safety issues and would not create movements that would be over capacity, as in a movement that would not be able to be processed over the course of time. So certainly there are increases in the amount of delay experienced by vehicles as a result of really any development. Anytime you're adding vehicle trips to a network, other people might have their commute, the time of their commute might be increased, right? That's just a nature of development, a nature of traffic patterns. It's just like if an exit was closed and somebody got off at a different exit, it's going to impact those people at a different exit.
So one last question. Appreciate your comment about you using your engineering judgment and how that's led you to your belief that there's not a significant increase in traffic or queuing. But I note in your presentation, while you took umbrage with the police commission's description of the increase in traffic and queuing as significant, the police commission also specifically said that there would be a significant impact on traffic safety. I noticed in your presentation you didn't mention disputing that. I think you might have just said now that you do. But my question is, if we're to give you the benefit of the doubt of your engineering judgment about traffic volume, should we not give the police commission of the town the benefit of the doubt on their analysis about whether it creates a safety issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question to ask. Certainly, the boots on the ground police force has a lot more experience with the very specific movements around town. Again, what my task is when I get brought in to look at this, and I've looked at it from the lens of Mr. Galante representing municipalities. I've worked on behalf of state DOTs in their attempts to improve safety or operations. So I try to apply as fair a viewpoint as I can. But what I look for is, are there existing safety issues based on the data that we can see? And that's not to say that there's never been a crash, right? That we know that there have been crashes out here. But are there enough crashes that it tells me, in the way I'm evaluating this as an engineer, that there is a safety deficiency? The data doesn't show that. And then I look at how many vehicle trips would the project I'm evaluating, and in this case, I've been hired by 7-Eleven to review their impacts. I haven't been hired by 7-Eleven to tell you that everything's going to be perfect. I wouldn't be able to do that the way that my licensure works. I'm representing the data that I have reviewed and my interpretation of the data. So I'm not here to say that everything's perfect. I'm here to look at, do I see a safety deficiency? Do I expect this 7-Eleven project to make that safety deficiency worse? I don't see from the data a safety deficiency. Again, not to say that there haven't been crashes, not to say that things couldn't be better somewhere, but there isn't data that shows that. And then our numbers and my understanding of those numbers and my interpretation of those numbers show that this project, this particular project we are evaluating, the 7-Eleven, would not have a significant impact on the safety of the movements in proximity to the site.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Okay, any other questions from the board members? Or Woody, do you have something to add?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just wanted to clarify a bit. In the 1990s, what the state apparently did was prepare an interchange redesign and did present it in some fashion to the public, probably in an informational hearing. And yes, there were objections to it by Darien residents. But I don't know if that necessarily equates to what I think has been implied here, is that the state is okay with the configuration of this area because it didn't proceed with that project. Not sure that's accurate. So my question is to Mr. Adams or others, do you have any evidence that the state is actually satisfied with the alignment, the one-way configuration, and so forth in this area? Or did they just simply move on to some other project to spend their money on? And yes, maybe put up some signage or other things, but does this meet the current state geometry guidelines, the way the roads are laid out now?
So I think on the first question, what happened in the 1990s is, interesting from a, the state looked at it and residents objected standpoint. But more importantly, as Jason noted and shown on the slide, DOT also just looked at this intersection to do these improvements that were completed last summer. So certainly we're not saying, and I think Jason was clear, that DOT has within the last, call it 2 years, looked at this intersection, made improvements, evaluated it, and then I think more importantly, both Mr. Adams and Mr. Galante have been in touch with the DOT about this project in the context of this application. Mr. Galante's report notes that he spoke to District 3. We will need an encroachment permit as part of this application process. So it's not like DOT is unaware that this application is pending, but in accordance with usual policy, DOT waits to do anything substantively as far as approving an application or anything like that until local approvals have been obtained. So, the information that we have from the DOT, there's nothing that they've indicated to us or in conversations with Mr. Galante that would have been reported in his peer review to indicate that we would need to redo the intersection or something like that. So I do think that based on the work that was done, as Jason explained, and the reach out that both us and Mr. Galante have done, indicates that certainly DOT is aware of the project.
Okay, anything further from the board or staff? Okay, I'm going to open this up to public comment. Please direct your questions towards the board members, and please refrain from attacking presenters on either side. With that said, is there anyone from the public that wishes to be heard on this application? And I would remind the public that we spent 3 hours on this application at the last hearing. We're willing to spend as much time as we need to get everyone's comments in, but really the only new aspect to this file is the addition of the police department and the police commissioner's report on this application. So with that being said, if you wish to be heard, just sort of step forward one at a time and we'll try and get you all in. And I think I saw David Smith wanting to comment. If you want to comment, Mr. Smith, please feel free to start.
There are a lot of, it's David Smith, 26 Birch Road. There've been a lot of discussion, a lot of comments, a lot of arguing about what facts mean. The Legal Traffic Authority has written a pretty strong letter. It's pretty obvious what their conclusion is. It's obviously informed by the facts on the ground. I think, you know, we're all grateful for the time that you all have put into this. It's pretty obvious what needs to happen, and the concerned citizenry hopes that you can now quickly move to recognize the authority of the traffic authority and put this to bed. And we implore you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bach, do you wish to be heard?
Yeah, very briefly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just one point of clarification that I wanted to make, particularly is there were comments towards that the neighbors are constantly comparing this site to the Chick-fil-A. So let me just make, at least I personally will plead guilty to, I have been one of the noisier neighbors on this topic. But to be really clear, Mr. Adams said before that, you know, you can't necessarily attribute an uptick in traffic to a certain site or use. And as the Chick-fil-A example, while I would agree that they are not comparable uses, nobody could go by Chick-fil-A and not know what the problem is. So that part, I don't, that they are different uses, they are different, and nobody is comparing to say because of what I think the good example is, and this is what the neighbors have been saying, is taking an average number for what a gas station does across the country and extrapolating those numbers onto that site where 7-Eleven drives lots and lots of traffic through their app. Chick-fil-A is also another business that runs an awful lot of business to their site through their app, and making the comparison that they are absolutely very different businesses, but Chick-fil-A also is a really good example of, well, what if the traffic data is wrong? And those are the reasons that we keep pointing to it of what if. However, we are not making comparison that they're similar businesses. And nor is there any mystery at that intersection. Nobody is going to point to that intersection and say the problem is PC Richard, for example. So that's it. Thanks for listening. Have a lovely evening.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just one more quick reaction to I forgot to comment on, if I may.
Yes, please.
The other thing that I keep your admonitions in mind to keep it above board here, but I would just like to reinforce what I think is probably obvious to you. Calling something a primary or ancillary use is really just semantics. There is no practical comparison between a 4,000-foot convenience store and a 500-square-foot convenience store or a 700-square-foot convenience store. There's just no comparison. And when you put a fast food service place inside a 4,000 square foot convenience store. You've added another primary use. You can call it ancillary if you want to, but you know, the commission is, you guys are allowed to recognize what it is despite what it's calling itself. You can call a pig a horse, but it's still a pig. And English has normative uses. And we know what this is. It's obvious. And, you know, putting a title, you know, the fact that somebody's put a title on it in an application, it's just words. And you guys are entitled to make judgments about what it is based on what you see, as opposed to what it's calling itself. And that's a legal fact. And I'm sorry to harp on the point, because I'm sure you already know that, but the public knows it too. And obviously we need you, you know, we need your help, because we can't protect ourselves without you.
Thank you for your time this evening. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to be heard? Okay. Seeing no one, let's move on from the location and the traffic study. Attorney Suchins,
Yep.
When you started this hearing some months ago, process some months ago, I told you you have a very steep hill to climb with regard to your variance application. You know, we just went through a revision of our sign regulations within a year. And so, you know, you really need to convince me what your hardship is and why you need this variance. Why not having this variance doesn't allow you to have substantial use of your property. Mr. Fulton, a better standard to that, but you know, that's the bar that you have to get over, and it's a very high one. So I'll let you proceed on that.
Yep. Sorry, just wanted to make sure I was off mute. If I could share, let me pull up the site plan for you. Let's see. Can you see the site layout?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I wanted to do was just scroll in here so you can see, you know, with respect to, I think everybody remembers that we have, we've number one, we've substantially reduced the signage requests on the property. Where I want to start, and particularly with respect to your question, Mr. Chairman, is the location of the fuel price sign. If you remember from your regulations, what the requirement is that our fuel price sign cannot be located anywhere closer to the street than the fuel canopy, which is obviously right here. So it would also cut through, you know, approximately the first quarter of the building. The fuel price sign under your regulations also cannot be located on the canopy itself or on the building. So that means that with respect to the fuel price sign, we've asked for it to be located approximately 5 feet from the property line. And if you notice right here, because of the DOT taking line, which is as noted here, our property line is not consistent with the Boston Post, you know, with the Boston Post Road and what had previously been the street line, because the entrance ramp to the road is here. So practically speaking, when you look at this application, what we are looking for, this 5 feet from the property line, is in fact approximately 12 feet from the curb line. I would note that the mobile station across the street, if you need a visual representation, is also approximately 12 feet from the property line, because their property line goes straight along the Boston Post Road. And so it is really the orientation of this property where we're limited, where the taking line, which is, unusual and unique to this property, because not every property along the Boston Post Road has a highway entrance ramp that required a taking of the owner's property. And so that is the reason for the need for this variance request. There is no other location where we could put a fuel price sign that would be compliant with your regulations, that would be, frankly, visible from the street, or there is an element, I think I had a back and forth with Mr. Williams at an earlier meeting. There is also an element of trying to be a good neighbor with respect to the signage. Arguably, a compliant location for a sign would be directly adjacent to Mr. Fletcher's building. It doesn't make any practical sense there. It doesn't have any visibility. He has extensive landscaping in this area that was added. And then obviously, we can't put it anywhere along this portion of the property because it's closer to the fuel island, or excuse me, closer to the street than the canopy. And over here, back behind along the highway taking line, frankly, we think presents more of a safety issue, because people wouldn't be seeing the sign until they've already passed the entrance. So somebody sees the fuel price, may in fact slow down and create more traffic issues. So we do think that the hardship specifically to this property, related to this property, is the fact of the shape and the taking that occurred from the property line. I think under your regulations, section 1123 A and B talk about a number of the criteria. I think oftentimes we focus on the in most circumstances, the unusual hardship language, but there are, in fact, that's not the only criteria outlined in your regulations. I think here it talks about, and this is in subsection A, special circumstances or conditions described in the findings of the ZBA applying to the building or land for which the variance is sought, which are peculiar to such land or building and do not apply generally to land or building in the neighborhood and not resulted from the willful act of an applicant. So I think here, as I said, the issue of the proximity of the adjacent office building and not wanting to try and locate a sign over there certainly ties into the circumstances or conditions peculiar to this land or building, and same with any location here. So we do think that, from a true hardship standpoint, there is a basis for the granting of the fuel price variance, fuel price sign variance, and then there are additional elements that are, factors for your consideration that take that into effect. And then with respect to, I'm just going to switch which screen I'm sharing, with respect to the logo sign. Just want to pull up the sign package. So obviously there's the fuel price sign marked with the M, that's the monument, and then the wall sign. The other variances that we've requested are, one, related to the height of the 7-Eleven logo on the wall sign. And I'm just going to scroll down to the monument sign as well. We've removed all other signage from the building. If you remember, there was some earlier signage shown in these windows. Staff, after some initial discussion, we thought those were compliant, but the position was that those potentially require variances, so we remove those. So that 7-Eleven logo on the front wall is the only sign on the building. And as you see here, it is approximately 5 feet. Each of the portions of the 7 and the 11 are within the allowable 26 inches. The variance request is to allow the 7-Eleven logo itself to be considered, excuse me, let me rephrase that. The regulation require or disallows any letter or logo greater than 26 inches. And so each of these, as I said, components is less than 26 inches. So we think the spirit of the regulations satisfied. The overall size of the 7-Eleven as the logo obviously exceeds 26 inches. And the issue there is that in order to put a sign with our logo on the building, a 26-inch maximum would reduce the allowable signage to approximately 5 square feet on the building, or frankly on the monument sign. So let me scroll down to the monument sign because it's the same issue there. Obviously no signage on the canopy, but here the 4-foot logo sign, this, I believe Woody's staff memo includes the breakdown of each of the portions of the sign, but this one is approximately 15 square feet in round numbers. But the 7-Eleven itself, the logo is approximately 48 inches. It's a little less because there's the white space underneath. But the same thing, if we would be limited substantially below what is allowed in the regulations, if that is actually interpreted, the logo language is interpreted literally, thereby substantially reducing our allowable signage. And so the variance requests are to allow that logo to exist as shown on these signs. It's 48 inches in lieu of 26 and 60 inches in lieu of 26 in order to address each of those signs and allow the logo. I think again that goes back to the unusual nature of this. If you think about, the reason that you had amended your regulations, or excuse me, the P&Z had amended their regulations arose out of Shake Shack and those letters. If you think about the Shake Shack design, their logo is the green hamburger. They're approximately 18 inches, and unlike the Shake Shack logo or frankly the other comparisons, there's some in the staff report with the the Chipotle pepper, where the logo is to the the pepper portion of the logo is on the same plane as the sign, or excuse me, the letters on the sign. Similar with the Jaguar cat on the Jaguar sign, and I think the other one was the Chase Bank. And frankly, the Mobil station across the street, if you look at the approval that was in there, that's in your file for the variance they received in 1993, that Pegasus logo is frankly about the same size. It's according to that, the Pegasus logo is approximately the same size as the wall sign here. So I think this is a circumstance where the regulation itself is really, tying into those issues that are outlined in your, regulations. This is something where it works an unusual hardship, because the intent of the regulation was to, limit the, the overall lettering. But if we had a different style logo, that it was similar to Shake Shack or something like that, we would be allowed substantially larger signage that's consistent with what's allowed under the regulations. But because we have a logo that sort of one, inherent, combined figure. It can't be it can't be really broken apart where, we're allowed 26 inches in a way that, maintains the logo and the branding. So I think, when you look at, what the purpose of the regulation was, and, the purpose of the overall amendments to your signage regulations, and what we're showing as far as, this configuration where each of the, sorry, I scrolled up too far, each of the portions of the logo itself are compliant with, that overall limitation. In fact, a little bit smaller. We're certainly peculiar in the sense that we have a logo that is, different than I think what's envisioned by your regulations.
Okay.
And
If I may, please, Attorney Suchis,
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions and issues, and we're moving from one issue to the next. So before I have to backtrack all the way,
Sure.
yes, it was me that we had the back and forth at the very first meeting when Mr. Chairman was not available, and I chaired that meeting, and I said the exact same thing. I said, you're going to need to convince me of your hardship here because, I'm it may be an uphill battle. Those were my exact words. And your exact reply was, it's my job to convince you. And I appreciate that. It is your job to convince me. And here are a couple issues that I have, however. First of all, I think you may have misspoke, or maybe I misunderstood, that you referenced that it was our regulations that the fuel price signs be visible from the street. And I don't believe that's the case. I believe it's a state regulation. And to that end, I believe I read a document, and I've read many, from town council, which states that, no pun intended, which states that there really is not a regulation from the state or the DEP or whatever regulatory body it is that mandates that fuel prices are visible in an area that requires a variance. Again, I will reference the Shell station that I go to regularly. Their signs are not in an area that requested a variance, and their signs for their fuel prices is what I refer to, are not in an area that required a variance. They're on the building. And yet I keep hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because that's why I'm asking, why is it such, and who's mandating, and where does it say? Because I'm pretty sure I read a letter from town council saying that, yeah, no, that's not really what the case is, that they need to be in an area that requires a variance. That's my understanding. And also I'd like to point out that I was the one that also suggested that you change from a pole sign to a monument sign to make your job a little bit easier in convincing me. But I'm having a hard time for a number of reasons, including but not limited to what's on my screen right now. It is 100% semantics to try and explain to me that each portion of this logo is less than the regulation. Yes, the whole thing the whole logo needs a variance, but you're saying, Mr. Williams, but this portion doesn't need it, and this portion doesn't need it. That's not the case, because the white area is part and parcel of the logo. So it's the entire thing I'm looking at, not a portion. That is a semantics issue as far as I'm concerned. And that's really my comments at this point. And if you could address that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So number one, I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage because I have asked for whatever memo was provided to you by town council and was told that those are shared with the commission. So I don't know what that memo says, but based on your representation of it and the regulation that was provided, I will be clear that there are state regulations mandating how the fuel price is displayed at the pump itself. So there are very specific, if you think about most of the stations you've gone to, you see a certain price display on the top of the pump. The issue that we're talking about is that allowing a fuel price sign closer to the street, frankly, makes common sense. And part of why it makes common sense is because it allows drivers who are making a decision about whether or not to stop for gas, often based on price, the ability to see that from from an appropriate distance. I do think that was, while not explicitly outlined in the variance that was given to the mobile station across the street, from the resolution itself, I think probably tied into that. Variances are obviously tied to the property themselves, and I'm not trying to say that because they got a variance, we should get a variance, but I do think that the proximity and location on the Boston Post Road is certainly relevant. And I also think that what I was trying to say about the white area on the sign is that we are including them. What I was trying to emphasize was that we obviously understand and agree that the totality of the logo is greater than 26 inches, and therefore we requested the variance. If we disagreed with that, we wouldn't be here, because I would still be having an argument with Woody about what your regulation means. But we agree that under the literal wording of your regulation, each of the components doesn't matter. It's the sum total, that the size of the 7-Eleven logo itself exceeds 26 inches, and so we need a variance. And so I'm just trying to make the point that the need for the variance is due to the unusual nature of the 7-Eleven logo, that unlike many other brands where you can provide, you can maintain your corporate branding and provide, put a sign that's compliant, we can't do that under the literal application of your regulations without working the substantial injustice on us, which is reducing the amount of permitted signage by approximately 75%. That if we were allowed a 26-inch 7-Eleven logo, that would be a sign of approximately 5 square feet. Under your regulations, for both the wall sign and the monument sign, we're allowed upward of 20 square feet. The wall sign is actually quite larger. So if the literal application of your regulations to this property, to this use, is specifically, there is that language about, a substantial injustice or substantial reduction, that's exactly what we have here, is that, as I said, it's, in round numbers, it's approximately 75% smaller if we had a 26-inch 7-Eleven logo than what would be allowed if our logo was similar to, like I said, to the Shake Shack, to Chipotle, where it's 26 inches has words next to it. So I think that's the issue with respect to the design of the logo. I saw Mr. Fullington put on his camera. So.
Just one specific question and then one broader question. The specific question, why couldn't you put the fuel price sign on the pillars under the canopy? Does that count as being attached to the building?
Yes, our understanding and the interpretation that we've understood is that the fuel price sign can't go on the building. And I will note that there are some photos in your regulations where the fuel price is in fact on the building, probably in violation of the regulations, and it can't be located anywhere on the canopy. So we,
Is the pillars that hold up the canopy are the building? Or a part of the
that's
building?
that is my understanding, that they can't be anywhere on that portion.
Okay. And then my more broad question is, you cited our regulations and how if we find there's something peculiar about the land, that's one component of it, right? We have to find that there's something peculiar about the land that's unique in the neighborhood, or unique is the right word, peculiar, and that has in some way deprived you of substantial justice in the use of your land if we literally interpret the code. So my question is the issue here really that there's something that peculiar about the land itself that's depriving you of any real substantial use of your property? Isn't it more your design and the size of your buildings and the locations of them that is creating this issue, and not something peculiar about the land?
No, because I think the issue that I apologize, I'm trying to remember. I think we talked about this. It may have been at the second night of the hearing, but the shape of the property, and I'm happy to go back to the site plan if needed. The shape of the property is such that we can't configure the canopies and the building where it's sort of a more traditional, I think what everybody thinks of as a traditional gas station layout with the canopy and pumps in front and the station behind, in order to provide appropriate circulation and, most importantly, fire and other protection. So the layout, the actual literal configuration of the site, and a pinch point being, that taking line, does constrain how we can lay out the site.
Well, but couldn't you mitigate any of those issues if you just had less pumps?
No, because it still requires the layout. The layout itself is dictated by the turn radius of the apparatus that needs to move on the site.
Okay. I'm no expert on turn radius. That seems a little strange, but I'll take your point on it. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, Attorney Seachens, I had a couple of questions. One of the things I asked you to do, and if you did it, I didn't see it, was to show us what a conforming sign would look like. And when we talk about substantial injustice, bear with me for a second. When we talk about substantial injustice and a 75% taking, and you use those terms, if I could see that visually and understand what the actual impact is, it would be beneficial to me in making my determination. So that was one of the things that I asked for. I didn't see it. If you have it, I'd be happy to look at it now.
So what we understood, and hold on, I just got to go back so I can see the sign package myself. So what I understood your request to be was to show a conforming sign, with the exception of the 7-Eleven logo itself and the location of the fuel price being closer to the street than an island. This sign conforms to your regulation. The fuel price is just under 12 square feet. The portion of the Roost and the portion of the 7-Eleven, excuse me, are approximately 18 square feet. We're allowed 20. So this is, a conforming, the signs that are shown here are all conforming with respect to the size of the signs themselves. So if your question, I guess, is, if what you're asking is whether the location of the fuel price could be shown in a well, let me go back to you. What was your request? I understood it to be the size of the sign, not necessarily a location of a sign, because you had said you had asked me to show you what a conforming sign would look like. And so I guess that's the, if it was a location, then I misunderstood your request. I thought you were asking for a conforming sign with respect to square footage. And the monument sign is conforming as to square footage for the 7-Eleven, the Roost, and the fuel price.
So I was looking for a conforming sign in a conforming location that conforms to our regulations, but okay, so we don't have that. So I didn't miss something. I'm happy about
Right,
that.
so it's just the fuel price. If we were to take the fuel price off of this sign,
Attorney
that-
Succi, can I finish speaking, please?
I'm sorry.
So if we remove the fuel price and we keep the 7-Eleven and the Roost, this is a conforming sign.
With the exception of the 7-Eleven logo itself being greater than 26 inches. On a square footage basis, this is a conforming sign.
Okay, so this is not a conforming sign as presented.
Square footage, yes, logo is larger, which is why we're asking for the variance.
Okay, so I guess we didn't get conforming as to size or location as part of the application, which is frustrating because, you know, we've been at this for a very long time, and that request wasn't made at the last meeting. It was made at the meeting prior to that. And really, when we make these determinations, if we can see what a conforming location and conforming size to the sign looks like, it is vastly helpful in determining whether a variance is warranted, because we can see, oh yes, that's a tiny sign that doesn't really help anyone recognize the location. So,
Right.
so that's,
And I apologize for that frustration, Mr. Chairman, because I had understood your request to be with respect to the square footage, not the location, because we had talked about where and Woody's memo had outlined where conforming locations could be. So I apologize if there was confusion about what you had asked for.
well, yeah, but it doesn't conform to the logo size either. Like even the location issue aside, it still doesn't conform as to the logo size. So you haven't provided a conforming sign for us to evaluate on either aspect.
Right. So a conforming logo sign would be approximately the same size as the Roost sign.
Yeah. Okay. All right. It just would have been helpful to see. The other question I have is, you talk about the taking for the highway as the hardship here. Let me understand a couple of things. One, what was the process of that taking? Was the landowner compensated by the state for the property that was taken?
It would have been a prior landowner. I don't know.
Okay. And do you know whether or not it was negotiated with the state, what part of their property was taken?
I do not, but my experience is that that is not typically a negotiated item, because it's you know, it needs to comply with whatever DOT is designing. So when I've dealt with it in other circumstances, they often say, we're taking your land for you know, the road, and the fight is over compensation when it comes up.
Okay. And had there not been a taken, what would your sign allowance be? Where would this fuel price sign end up? So let's imagine that your hardship went away. Where could you put this fuel price sign then?
Then I think if we had no if we had no taking, arguably there is area along the
Can you show me on the,
hold on, I was just gonna say, let me pull up the, so arguably it would offer an option to look at locations here. You know, we would still need a variance, which is exactly why I think the taking line is part of the hardship, that even without it,
I'm sorry,
you know-
Tracy, I don't see your map.
oh, I'm sorry. There, should be up. So here's the taking line. I think even, you know, my point being that the taking line is relevant because it eliminates any option for us to explore. You know, if you straightened out, you know, this taking line and sort of brought it consistent with the curb line, it would allow it could allow a different configuration of the site, you know, that would accommodate other things, you know, whether it was, you know, Mr. Fullington's comment about eliminating the additional fuel pumps. It could theoretically reorient the driveway, but because the taking line is here, and frankly, that's my point about it and why it's unique to this property, is it's truly a limitation, and particularly because it, you know, it carries through here. It's not like we could get an access easement, you know, with an adjacent property owner. It's truly a limiting characteristic of the property, you know, to basically keep the driveway in its current configuration and allow for, you know, development on the site.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree with Mr. Fullington. I think that there are opportunities with this site plan that, you know, you could have taken to further improve your location of your signage for the fuel price. I'm having a really hard time, you know, seeing that taking as a material hardship. I mean, it certainly dictates the configuration with the number of pumps and the size building that you have, but it doesn't if you reduce the overall development of the site. You'd have much more opportunity to you know, find alternative locations. So I'm really having a hard time with that. I don't know if any other board members have any questions or comments, but okay.
Chairman?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, hi.
Sorry.
Regarding, yeah, Woody, regarding the fuel price location, what the regulation says is that it has to be at least as far back from the road as the gas island. So the fact is that fuel pricing can be on the canopy support pillars. We have quite a few stations in town with just that. That chart we did of all the other stations and their signage clearly shows that. The other opportunity would even be on the building, as long as it was as far back from the road as the gas island. So the regulation does not prohibit locating a fuel price on this property. Now, the other thing I just wanted to ask about, and I think Mr. Fullington clarified this a couple months ago. I don't believe there's any state regulation that says that fuel pricing has to be visible to drivers on the road. In fact, most of our stations don't have that feature. But there is a Department of Consumer Protection series of regulations, as Ms. Suchin mentioned, about being on the pumps themselves. So So I don't know of any requirement that the monument sign needs to have fuel pricing. It couldn't be someplace else. While we're here, let me mention that there is another variance which involves the height of the wall sign above the ground. And I gather there's been some architectural change that may affect where that's located on the wall. And the question is, could that wall design change to better fit the wall sign lower down on the. Thank you.
All right, Woody, thank you for bringing that up. That was a question I was going to ask. Is the wall sign height the physical distance from the ground, or is the wall sign height the height of the logo? I guess I'm struggling with that a little bit.
There are both.
Both.
We didn't get to the height because we started talking about the content, but let me go back to the, actually, I think it's in the, hold on. So just switch. Right, so there is a height variance request based on, so that there's the as I mentioned before, there's the 7-Eleven logo itself, which needs a variance request for the 26 inches. And then there is a height request to allow the sign to be located at 20 feet as a maximum rather than 15 feet as a maximum. As you can see, you know, the roof line here is at 13. So we would get just above, 15 is approximately just where the shading is sort of, the color changes a little bit different. So we would need to, a compliant location would basically require an architectural revision to this side of the building, which frankly, we had made a number of revisions to the building in response to comments that we got from the ARB and from P&Z about the style of the building. And so, that is the height request is with respect to, obviously, like I said, the size of the 7, but also where it's located on the building.
Okay, I think I understand the issues. Any other questions from the board? Oh, sorry, are you not finished? Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to raise one other comment. The fuel price sign regulation in the design parameters actually does say it can't be located on the building. It has been our understanding that it's worded as shall not be located on the canopy or building. I certainly am aware from reviewing a number of the other stations in town, and what the signage, or not just the signage, but the overall chart that Woody and Fred had prepared for both you and P&Z, that there are fuel price signs located on or adjacent to buildings, but under your current regulations, those are either legally non-conforming or illegal. I will admit I did not research all of the approvals for some of those fuel price signs to find out, when the regulation changed. Woody and I did discuss, and I went back through the sign amendments that P&Z did in 2018, sort of in the Shake Shack aftermath, and the location, the prohibition on the location between the gas island and the street predates that regulation, and I think probably dates back fairly far, given that as I said, the Mobil station across the street did get their variance in 1993. So as best as I and staff could figure out, that was not something that was evaluated or put in place in the most recent signage amendments.
Okay. I will note that the 1993 variance was under a different set of zoning regs, so not sure the basis for the grant of that variance, but each property is
Right.
unique, and we have to evaluate each individual application, not
Right.
look at what we've done in the past. So, okay, as I started before, anybody, Attorney Suchins, are you done?
I am done unless there are questions for me.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions from any board members. It looks like no. Okay, again, I will remind the public, please address your statements to the board members, and we will get you answers as best we can. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to be heard on this application? Okay. Seeing no one, I guess Woody will go ahead and close this one out unless anyone has any reason to continue it. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your time. We're moving on to calendar number 1, 2021, the application of Jeffrey McDougall.
Mr. Chairman, do we need to officially close that?
I believe I did. Do I have to make a motion?
I'm not sure. I just want to make sure we're correct on procedure here, sir. That's all.
I don't think I have to make a motion to close it.
No, you don't need to make a motion to close, just to clarify that in fact, that's the end of the hearing.
Okay.
Yes, that hearing is closed.
Okay, done. Thank you.
Moving on to the ever patient Jeffrey McDougall on behalf of Brian and Sarah Williamson on 21 Oak Park Avenue. If you are here on that application, please step forward and Fred can help you get whatever controls you need.
Okay, Jeff McDougall from Williams Seymour and Associates, representing Brian and Sarah Williamson on their application tonight. Can everyone hear me okay?
Doing great.
Doing great? Okay, great, thank you. This property is located on the west side of Oak Park Avenue at its terminus where there's a turnaround. It's a single family house. Interesting history to this piece of property. This house was moved to the property sometime after 1950. I believe that they started the work sometime around 1950 and finished most of the house around 1956. Came to be that when they went to get their financing on the house and went to provide a survey for the closing, they found out, gee, this house is too close to the road. And, looking back through the file, looking at the different variances and different documentation that was presented on this, I mean, it somewhat seems obvious to me that what may have happened, and I've actually seen this happen before, is that the property corners may have been staked, and instead of somebody taking into account the curve of the property, the street line being that turnaround, they probably just strung a string between the two corners and said, yep, oh, we're far enough back from this. Well, come to find out, when they had the map done in September 11th, 1956, the house was too close to the street line. It had, at that point, been about 97% complete, according to the Zoning Board of Appeals application. So there was an application made and approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals. It was calendar number 72-1956, and they did allow the house to remain since it had been constructed, and it seemed to be some sort of an error in placement of the house as to why it is where it is. The proposed construction consists of adding a attic space to this house. When you look at the photographs of the house, and I could show some of the photographs here. Get this up where we can actually see it. Yeah, that's where I'd like to be living. So let me see if I can get this. I don't know why. Okay. Okay, we're getting.
Is now a good time to talk about my crippling fear of heights?
What was that? You know, so when you look at this house and you could see the front of this house is very low roof line, very plain front facade to it. There is this kind of unusual bump out window next to the front entryway. And when you look at the proposed construction and you look at like the front elevation, you could see how it will be quite an improvement on the look of this house when this work is completed. So you'll see what is currently existing and what is proposed. So you've got the raised roof line, kind of breaks up the mass of the roof by having this ridge in here. So that's what we're looking at, is we're looking at raising this roof line and creating the front porch, a covered entryway along the front of the house here. When you look at a lot of the other structures, the let's see, I think I've got yeah, I think I've got some photographs that well, I cannot find them. Photographs of the neighboring houses, which really do show what we have, you know, what this neighborhood looks like as compared to what this house looks like. Most of the houses in that area have been reconstructed, added on to brand new house next door to this one. And, you know, the look of these houses is really, you know, really something. I mean, you know, they really improve the look of that neighborhood quite a bit. I don't know why I'm not finding the.
Hey, Woody, did everyone get a copy of that
Yes.
supplement that I got?
You should
Yeah,
have that.
I think they all do have those photos.
You have the photograph showing the adjacent houses and all. So
Yeah,
that,
they just came in the last couple of days, but yes, they were distributed.
okay.
Yeah, we have all the
distributed,
photos.
so.
We've got those, Jeff.
Okay. So you could see what those structures look like and all. You know, the hardship that runs with this property is obvious. We've got, you know, the position of this house being too close to the street line, you know, due to nothing that, you know, the owners did. It was something that they inherited when they purchased the house. I do know that they were not aware of that when they purchased this house, that, you know, this thing had been moved to this site. And it was a little strange, you know, I'm looking at the application that was presented in the 50s, and they talk about the house being relocated, and it's hard to read the writing. It looks like it says Ridgewood. I'm not sure where that was, but that's when the house was moved onto the site. So, you know, the position of the house on the property being close to the street. We also have, you know, the turnaround on this property is in front of the property is not your normal, you know, large paved turnaround. It's more like a circular, it's almost like a circular driveway with an island in the middle. So there really is no impact on neighboring houses with this house being closer to the roadway in here. It's quite separated by this island, and, you know, so you don't get that effect of having a house right across the street from you that's gotten closer. We also do have wetlands in the back of the property. There is a stream behind the property that, building towards that, would be encroaching into the upland review buffer and all. Some of the other work that's happening here is a small addition to the kitchen in the back. It's over a deck area. We're not increasing the footprint really back there, other than, it's going over the deck area. It's not even requiring a foundation. It's going to be built on sonotubes, as the front porch also will be built on sonotubes. So basically that's what we're looking for here. There's a variance for this front yard due to the fact that this house was put on the property in a incorrect position. And I'm just glad I wasn't the surveyor that handled that one.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, you want to talk?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a quick question about the front porch. We've sort of determined for health, well-being, and safety reasons that a reasonable covered front porch, due to the fact that we are a town in New England, which gets its fair share of ice and snow, that a reasonably sized front porch is a variance that can be granted for safety issues. Here you have a rather large front porch. Would you be, or would your clients be amenable to sort of reducing that to a size that we've previously approved, which I think, Woody, is it 5 by 8? Yeah, 5 by 8.
Yeah, looking at that, the configuration of the front of this house and where the door is and where that window is, we could reduce it, but I think what we'd be looking at here is more something in the line of 16 feet, which would encompass both that front window and the stoop, and that would kind of center the construction on the front of the house. So yes, we can reduce it. And as part of this, we're also reducing the front coverage by reducing, there's this roof overhang, partially down along the face of the house that we're going to remove. It's about a foot and a half wide. So it's almost a wash in terms of coverage when you look at the front of the house and the area that we're going to reduce and the area that we would increase if we reduce that porch down to the 16 feet instead of the 8 feet. So yes, the client is willing to reduce it, but I really think reducing it to 8 feet would be very difficult in trying to make that architecturally work with this house.
Yeah, okay. And then what percentage of the existing structure are you preserving? I mean, it looks like you're doing a pretty big project, right? I mean, it looks like the whole interior is being renovated. The only area that looks not being touched is the dining room.
I believe that, Kent Depley's on here. He can address the interior renovations, but when we're really looking at this towards the variance, the variance is for the attic area, which is not going to be living space, and the front porch area. We're not increasing the bulk of any of the living space within the front setback area. So Kent, I'm not sure if you want to address some of the interior work.
Sure, I'm on here. So Kent Epley, we did the plans and planning on doing the construction. So there is a fair amount of rework in there, but there's also a lot of that house that's existing. It's just we're getting a better kitchen, which is what the bump out is on the back, and combining 2 bedrooms upstairs for the master suite. But essentially the shape of the house is remaining, trying to get that roof to look like a more normal house in that area. I mean, if you see the pictures there, it just looks a little strange right now. The porch thing, I mean, we're trying to do the porch since there's so much room in that circle there, and there's a lot of land in the middle of that circle. It was just a nice feature to have the bigger porch. if the porch had to go smaller, we're trying to have it go up and over the stoop for safety reasons and that kind of odd bump out, because the other problem is that the door is not centered on the house. And so in order to kind of play off of that and not have it look strange, that would be kind of the minimal reduction there, if you would, to still have it look good and not accentuate that the door is off center. I mean, the window, the door itself and the hall and the way it feeds in kind of has to remain without reworking everything inside.
Okay. So what I heard is that the basic box and structure of the first and second floor framing is going to remain. It's just interior, sort of reworking interior walls. Woody, do you need more clarification than that?
Yeah, we do. Basically we ask, is the existing foundation going to stay? Is the existing first floor structure, first floor walls, second floor, and so forth? What are we going to see, assuming this project goes forward? What's going to stand there and still remain?
The exterior walls are going to remain. The foundation is going to remain in place, except obviously we're going to do the little bump out in the back, but that's not changing any of the existing foundation. So as far as the structure you see now, I mean, it's going to have new siding, new windows, whatever porch we're allowed, a steeper roof that's going to bring it more into a normal, looking structure than that low roof that's there now. We'd like to keep the option to be able to do something in the attic later, if that's possible, or at the very least to be able to finish the space that's not in the non-conformity area in the attic. But it's not something we're looking for right now, but just for their sake, trying not to limit what they can do here. But the main focus was to make the house more aesthetically pleasing and more fitting with the neighborhood. If you saw the other houses there, there's one picture there that I think you have in your packet that shows the house to the left and their house, and you can see that the roof line would make it much more in keeping with the neighborhood. Do you have that picture in your packet? So anyway, that's the thought there, is to try and just make it look like a more normal colonial than. I'm not sure the reason why they did the roof that way, but it's definitely unusual.
And we do have support of pretty much all of the neighbors. You have the letters in the file that, they are on board with this application and are kind of looking forward to this house being made to look a lot more like the surrounding houses in the neighborhood.
Did I hear that you're taking out the existing overhang that is, I guess, right above the first floor? Is that correct? And
That's correct.
That's, I presume that is currently in the setback area?
Yes, it is.
And roughly how many square feet is that overhang that's coming out that is currently non-conforming, that area would then become, I guess, reduce that amount of non-conformance?
I think we were looking, what is it, about 48 square feet or something like that for that overhang area. And, depending on the size of the front porch, it's very close to being a wash when it comes to the two areas.
Put aside the front porch for a second. How much additional square footage is being built in the setback area because of the building of the attic?
The square footage of
structure is being put in the setback area by putting in the new roof that would be the attic, I guess.
I don't have a number on that, because that's the current houses there. So we're not increasing square footage in that area. We're increasing bulk, yes. the attic area is bulk, but the square footage being increased would be the proposed front porch in the setback area.
Yeah, I don't, the
I don't
roof,
understand this clearly. If we take the porch out of the equation, are we reducing the amount of square footage that is currently non-conforming?
Yes, if you took the porch out of the equation,
Okay.
yes.
the
Yeah, I
roof
think-
itself is the same, it's the same amount of distance into the setback. It's just got a steeper pitch now, to make it look better.
Okay.
So I gotta say, I love the design, Kent. I love your work. I think it looks great. And I sold 23, which was the first house to be done in that neighborhood. So I love that everyone is cleaning it up. It looks great. Why anybody would relocate this particular house is very interesting to me, but I won't even get into that. Who knows what that was about? But you know why they did it?
We don't know the history there. I want to say, I'm wondering if it had something to do with the throughway, because it's right around that time when, the throughway was coming through, they were building it. It very well could have been that house was, one of those that was in the way.
Well, yeah, but it's awful. I mean, I'm sorry, no offense. They should have started over. So I think I love what Kent did. Like, let's scrap the house and start over. I think the only thing I keep, and our board gets hung up on this, minimum adjustment in the space. So that porch, although it befits the house beautifully, that's a tough one. I don't know how our board would rule on that, because I have to tell you, we only allow porches in the setback. Mike said it right out of the get-go. So what happens to the design? I think it sounds like you'd be willing to reduce that porch to give the minimum adjustment necessary.
So the request would be if that the full porch cannot, just isn't something that could be done. The hope would be to do the porch that's the 16 feet wide, just because of that strange bump out and the fact that the front door is not centered, to just put an 8-foot portico over the front door, accentuating the off center, and that bump out comes halfway, or not halfway, it comes a foot onto the porch. It just, that was another, a smaller element that would help, increase the curb appeal and not accentuate the fact that the front door is just not centered on the structure. I mean, the whole thing, the roof, the front door, the bump out, we're trying to, without breaking the bank, we're trying to obviously bring this more in keeping with the neighborhood.
Unfortunately, breaking the bank doesn't count as a hardship. So I'm trying to think what else
No.
we can do here. Now, the mechanicals, where are those going to go? If you look at the plan, they'll all be on the side or within conforming areas, yes?
They're all the same. Nothing is changing mechanical wise. The basement is there. The mechanicals that are there remaining. There's no square footage we're adding. The little bit of porch, if we go with the smaller version, the little bit of porch that's being added is not something that the mechanicals would affect. So it's really, just, the safety factor and trying to make it work with what's already there, non-conforming.
And
We are taking off a fair amount of that cheek roof all the way across. So net, there's not a big difference of square footage. If you can look at it that way, that's if you take the left and right cheek roofs that we're taking off and take the smaller version of the porch, we're really back to about what you have now.
And we're under 20% coverage, I assume, on total lot coverage?
Well under, yes.
Okay. All right, I'm done. Thanks.
Okay.
Looks like we lost, oh, there's Jeff. Jeff, did you have some comments or questions? You're muted.
No, actually, my fellow board members have covered it, no pun intended, because I was going to coverage and I was also going to size of the stoop as well. Pardon me, I'm sorry. But in the end, and this is more of a deliberation issue, but in the end, I think it's a matter of, had it not been for this house being incorrectly placed, and I happen to agree with Jeff about the highway, had it not been incorrectly placed, they wouldn't be here because there's plenty of buildable room here. And I can address that further in deliberation, but I have no doubt that they have strong neighbor support for this project. I can assure you. I'm going to stay away from Barb's comments relative to this house and its current condition, but the general sense is I think they've got a very strong hardship here. So I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Just for clarification, Mr. Epley, can you tell us the exact dimensions you're proposing for the reduced porch size?
Jeff, you have that. Do you have that there?
Sorry.
I think we were looking at, was it 6 foot by 16 foot? Yeah, see if I have the exact dimensions.
Yes. It was basically the minimum we could do to cover that funny bump out to the left of the front door and the stoop. It's basically end of the stoop to the end of that strange bump out was, I think it was 16.5 feet.
Yes, I see 16 foot 6 inches is what I'm looking at.
And can we pull that back to the 5 feet instead of 6 feet?
The stoop that's there right now, well, part of it too is, again, if we're going down to the smaller one, is to hopefully take a little bit of credit for the cheeks on the left and the right that we're removing. But part of it is because of that bump out, if we then go shorter, the section in front of that little bumped out double window it almost becomes useless. You follow me?
Yeah, and did you ever consider just getting rid of the bump out? It seems an odd construct. I don't know what's in there.
Well, yes, we did. We've looked at it all. The problem is just once you take that out, now the front door is accentuated that it's off center, and then it just gets into a complete rework of the inside. So, again, we're trying to clean it up. We're trying to bring it more into, a more normal looking house for the neighborhood. And it was just a way to kind of, tie that together and still have not accentuate the fact that everything's off center. It's a tough one to work with, but we're trying, we've got to work with a certain amount of what's there.
Okay, understood.
Okay.
Woody?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. By way of background, we've been looking at porches for many years, at least in my experience here. And what the board has tried to practice is not allowing activity space porches, but just minimal safety porches. I think that's been the theme for a couple decades, actually. So we've had a practice that came down to just 8 feet wide. This would be a significant departure from that, which I know other people, including maybe these applicants, would be looking at on other properties. So we're on a slippery slope here. The other thing is, it's very uncomfortable for staff if you're feeling like you could approve something, say 16 feet wide and 5 foot deep. You don't have a plan for that. We have a hard time as staff trying to figure out what did the board intend and how would the roof look? Would it have 4 columns or 2? And it's just a shaky thing when we don't actually have a drawing that you're specifically approving. So I wouldn't encourage an approval here with some conditions. That I would encourage you to actually see something different and continue the hearing if you need to.
Yeah, Jessica, would you be willing to submit that revised plan, and we'll continue this hearing until our next Woody, when is our next meeting?
Could I,
Yeah, March 10, 1 month.
could I
One month.
jump in here real quick? If you don't mind, if you would be agreeable to this, and it's just, the house is vacant now. We'd like to get started. Would it be possible to approve the steeper roof on the main house and then come back to the porch so that we could at least get started? Because obviously that's the first thing that's got to happen permit wise. It's a big part of the work that's got to get done to take that roof off and get it on. The porch is an attachment that we could deal with one way or the other, whether it's next hearing or whatever, but at least we don't lose a month in the progress of the project. Would that be a reasonable option?
Yeah, I think the way that would work is we would deny your porch, and well, if we deny though, then they have to wait 6 months before they can reapply, right, Woody?
Yeah, in theory, you could deny it without prejudice, I suppose, because you didn't have a drawing to fairly evaluate it. The other thing is they could withdraw the porch proposal now and come back with a different plan, yes, and a new application. The continuation may make the most sense here, actually, but if the push is to get the big picture renovations going, well, and the porch should have been frankly designed to be smaller in the first place. This regulation and the board's practice, there's nothing new here. It's been a very long-term practice, so all applicants have understood this. We allow some safety cover, but not a large activity space. And there's been quite a few denials of larger porches. So encourage
I'll let the
even
applicants,
approval and denial.
yeah, I'll let the applicants decide how you want to proceed. You can withdraw the porch application, and we can look at the other aspects that you're requesting a variance for, which would give you the ability to get your project underway if we were to approve. Or you can leave them both there, and maybe you've done enough to convince the board that both variants should be granted. I think it'd be pretty tough, but there's always that possibility. So we leave it to the applicant's discretion whether you want to continue, you want to withdraw, or you want to just leave your application the way it is.
Brian, are you there? Are you? Just one of the homeowners there and able to chime in. Jeff, I hope you guys don't mind just talking so that he can make a decision with me. But do you think we should withdraw the porch and get the roof so we could get going?
I think Brian is actually there. We just can't hear you guys.
Okay. Jeff, are you there? Can you hear me?
I'm here. So, yeah, I mean, to me, I guess, getting the major portion of this work underway, if we just withdraw the porch section at this point and, deal with that at a later time, it really comes up to, how does that work with your schedule and all? I mean, how long is it going to take to do this work? And if we're looking at a couple of months out before you'd even get around to building this porch, is that really going to be that big of a deal?
Yeah, no, I mean, from our timing point of view, the biggest thing is to get this roof on and off and get started with the rest of the house. So my vote, and I don't know if Brian Williamson is there who could jump in, but my vote would be to just withdraw the porch and get the main roof approved, hopefully, so that we can move forward with that. And then we come back to you with a revised porch idea.
Hey, Brian, can we get like maybe a thumbs up or thumbs down if you agree with what your thumbs up?
So, John, thumbs up.
Okay. Yeah, I can't see Brian on my screen. So, okay. Okay. All right. So
Okay,
I
so
think that's what we'll do then. We'll withdraw the porch, and hopefully you'll see the merits of the rest of the main roof. Obviously, doesn't increase any of the footprint part of the issue. So I guess that's how we'll move forward.
Okay, and then the only thing I'm going to caution you is when you start your work, do not remove. Sorry, do not remove that, what do we call it? Cheek wall or cheek roof or,
Leave that until we get our approval for the porch.
right, so your porch application would have that removal as part of it.
Gotcha. Good point. Thank you.
I don't know if
Okay,
you guys
Woody,
can hear us
else?
now.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Woody? Nothing further? Anything further from the board?
Nothing further from me, no.
Okay. Anything further from the board? No? Okay. Anyone in the public wish to be heard on this application? Seeing no one, we will go ahead and close this application. On to deliberations. So
Thank you.
thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I know it's only been 2 hours and 15 minutes and not 3 hours like last week, but can we have a 3-minute break, please?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
We're just going to go on a short restroom break. Okay, Kevin, are you back?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Let's get started on the deliberations for the 7-Eleven application. Application 15-2020. I guess I'll sort of open it up with my thoughts. You know, we have a very narrow role in reviewing this location as a agent of the state of Connecticut to see if it is an adequate fueling station location. And although the statute on point was repealed that carried our standard of review, the statute that controls our authority is still in existence. And I think Attorney Suchins did an excellent job of outlining that part of the law for us. So I think we'll start with that piece of it. And I think we'll use the standard of review that Attorney Suchins had in her memo. See what I did with it. Okay. So it's a determination of its suitability, and I'm not going to read the entire standard, but taking into account the width of highway and effective public travel, and that such uses of such proposed location will not imperil the safety of the public. The other items that it deals with is proximity to schools, churches, theaters, playhouse, other places of gatherings, intersecting streets, traffic conditions, etc. So I think the most relevant issue here and the thing that we heard the most testimony on was the safety aspect of this location. I think our traffic consultant and the applicant's traffic consultant, were able to come to terms on, the number of cars. But I think they disagreed pretty strongly on the safety issues related to this location and its use as a gas station. The other thing I struggle with on this application is there's a proposed amendment to the zoning regulations to have this type of use in this zone. But under the current regulations, it's not an allowed use. So, Mr. Maslin's argument that we can't approve this even if we wanted to, or that because the zoning regulations don't allow it, they'd need to apply for a variance for that use, which hasn't been done here, makes this a really difficult application. So I don't know what your guys' thoughts are, what your opinion of what's going on here in this application. I'm happy to hear you out, but I think it's a really tough application. And then we could talk about the variance as well. And I'm not terribly convinced of the hardship. I'm not terribly convinced it's a minimum adjustment necessary. So I have a really hard time with the entirety of this application.
Okay, so I agree. Unfortunately, there's a couple things that I think we've all experienced. We've used that intersection. I think it's a problem. It has been, it was before there was a Dutchess, and it is with a Dutchess, and it will be an even greater problem with this intensity of use. I also think there's a number of ways they could have laid this out. They could have reduced the pumps. They could have changed the use. You could have dropped the chicken portion of this. There are different ways they could make that space work that would have allowed for the signage to work without the variance. I don't think you're ever getting around the safety issue, so that's kind of a non-starter for me, unfortunately. We could talk about the signage, but I don't see a hardship excuse for the signage either. We've gone to great lengths to put these requirements in place, and we've made everybody adhere to them. And the argument about the Pegasus from 1993 is lost on me because that's all changed. That game has changed. I don't see any reason why the signage needs to be other than our requirements. So safety is my big non-starter. But I also think there's just a lot of different ways they could have pitched this thing to make it work in that space much better than they have. So unfortunately, I don't see how this is going to work out.
Okay, Jeff or Dan?
Yeah,
I think I have the same concern as Barbara laid out, which is the safety. I heard all the arguments about the traffic consultant report. We also had the police report. Then there was also point raised by the petitioner that it's just going to add incremental traffic to the flow, which is not significant. But I think the issue is if we allow this increment, then we are setting up a precedent, for the next applicant to use the same logic. And I think given, my also personal experience driving around at that site, I'm not convinced that safety issue is addressed properly.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Dan. And I think one of the things that our traffic consultant recommended was that they limit it to a single lane of egress. And when I asked the applicant's traffic consultant about that, whether he had looked at that or studied it, he said no, they were only applying for the two. So I think that really made it clear that they didn't want to try and address some of the safety concerns that were raised by our traffic consultant.
Yeah.
Jeff or Kevin?
Sure. I mean, so on the first portion of the question we're being asked is this a suitable location for a gas station? You laid out the standard that we're supposed to use, which is agreed to by the applicant also. And that is, we're supposed to look at whether this will have an effect on public travel, presumably whether we think it will have a negative impact, and whether it could imperil safety. So we have two sides of that coin. On one side, the applicant has a transportation expert who's credible, who says, in his view, there isn't going to be a significant impact on the amount of traffic in the area, and there won't be a significant impact on safety. On the other side of that coin, we have the town's traffic expert who testified and confirmed that based on the applicant's numbers, we expect to see the number of trips into the 7-Eleven as compared to the Duchess double. And I think those numbers are indisputed that we'll see the amount of cars double. And our traffic expert said that it's a reasonable expectation that we will have additional accidents at the exit ramp from I-95 South, and that the number of accidents that we have that are in the reports that were submitted by the applicant is a high number already. And then when you add to that a report from the police commission, who are presumably the experts on public safety, saying they view this as a significant risk or would have a significant impact on public safety. We then, our duty, what we're charged with, is to evaluate the evidence on both sides and to use our own personal experience. I've driven through that intersection hundreds of times, as I know all the rest of you have. And based on my experience and based on the weight of all the evidence that's been presented, I think that this will have a detrimental effect on public travel, and I think this will imperil safety. So my inclination, subject to hearing from the rest of you, although I think you all agree, is to reject the application for the location of the gas station at this site. As to the second portion of their request, which are the variances, I don't believe that there is something substantially peculiar, to use the applicant's term, about this location that is creating such a hardship that they can't have substantial justice in the use of their property. There's no inalienable right to put a gas station here. There are plenty of uses, gas station or otherwise, that they could put at this location and have substantial justice in the use of their property and make money and be a commercial enterprise or otherwise. So on that aspect of it also, I would not be inclined to support the application for any of the variances because I don't view this as a truly peculiar piece of property that has developed a hardship for which they have no other option and they would be deprived of substantial justice in the use of their property.
Well said. I tend to agree with you. And the taking as a hardship, it just, what I didn't get an answer to that I would have liked to have had an answer to is what if the taking didn't occur, what would their viability be? And I also didn't get what a conforming sign would look like. And those two things really make it difficult on a board to understand exactly what the hardship is and exactly what the impaired use is. So I struggled with that. Jeff, anything further?
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, with regard to the first variance and having to do with safety and the location, I think it's really interesting that nobody has ever addressed, either the board or the applicant, the fact that at Dutchess, currently, when you exit the property, there are two arrows, both on, one on each side of the exit, pardon me, that point to the right, which clearly is directing traffic to turn to the right. Now, there's no island there. They removed the island when we approved the variance for the drive-through, and I don't remember what year that was, but we did. I thought it was a little shaky, but thank God it's not a Chick-fil-A because it's never really been a problem. But I would kind of be curious to know if that was a stipulation, because I seriously doubt that Dutchess put those there as a matter of fact, or because they thought that that was the right thing to do. I think it was probably a stipulation that we had those arrows purposely placed there, directing traffic to the right. Both those signs indicate that traffic needs to go to the right. So clearly this has been an issue before with regard to exiting that property to the left. Clearly it was. I don't think that was done voluntarily. I don't know for a fact, but I think it's very point of fact that those signs exist. Relative to the signage and the hardship and the minimum adjustment necessary, I provided advice to go to the monument and tried to direct them to address that. They took some of my advice, but they stopped at some point, and I don't think they've met that criteria either. So for those reasons, I agree with the balance of the board that I have a real problem in both areas.
Okay, yeah, and just to clarify, Jeff, the location approval is not a variance. We're acting as an agent for the DMV to Connecticut General Statutes 14-321. So it's a statutory role that we're placed in by statute in some of the definitions that Attorney Suchan's laid out, and also by the regulations of the town of Darien, as Attorney Suchan's pointed out in her presentation.
Understood. I misspoke, I referred to the site location.
Yeah. So, does anyone on the board feel like they need some time to go through? This was a big application. I mean, there was a lot of material submitted. There was a lot of presentation made by homeowners, et cetera. Does anyone feel the need to continue the deliberations so that we can organize those materials and make sure that everything is looked through? Or does everyone have a good sense of the materials and what's been provided? I mean, I know that I personally have a conference room table in my office filled with materials from this application, and
Yes.
I've gone through all of them. I've reviewed all of them. I asked that question about the conforming sign, which I had previously requested, to make sure that I hadn't missed anything, and it was confirmed that I hadn't. So I feel comfortable proceeding with the decision, but I just want to make sure you guys are okay with that as well.
I am only the police. Had I not had the police report, I probably would have been more on the fence because there were such divergent views from both the traffic consultants. But I am comfortable since we've had now 4 nights of hearings on this.
Me too, Mike. I'm also confident.
Yes, agreed. I've read every single piece of paper that was submitted. And as I said earlier, watched every minute of the first presentation and I've been involved in the remaining 3.
Okay. Okay, so with that, Woody, did you have anything further you wanted to put on the record or add to the conversation?
Well, I would just encourage to maybe state with your reasons for your decision, at least cite the particular evidence. It could be fairly simple. I think you all have the list of 55 some odd documents that were presented. And I think there may be 3 or 4 or 5 that you might want to highlight as, factors of consequence in your decision.
I mean, I think, Woody, what I would say is it's the totality of the application that was presented. I mean, the most helpful aspects for the location were obviously the police reports, the traffic studies, the testimony by the traffic analysts or engineers, excuse me. I think there's also a portion of, our personal understanding of this part of town and the traffic flow of this part of town. I don't have that. I know I have it here somewhere, but my file's gotten a little bit messed up. Let me see if it's in here.
So Mike, it says staff questions for February 10th, 2021 on top. And it's pages, okay. It's the last pages.
Yeah,
pages.
I mean, Woody, you've listed out all of the items that have been included. I don't think we need to go through and list specifically. We have, as a board, reviewed all of this material, and I think all of it in its totality, as I said before, has contributed to the decision. I don't think you can really point to 1 or 2 things. I think it's really the mass of testimony, the studies, et cetera, that were done that really led to the decision. And I think the decision on the location is a denial. I just don't see how, in good conscience, we as a board, I just don't think we would be doing our job to allow this to move forward with this type of development. I really struggle with it. So with that, I'll make a motion.
Mike, could I just add one thing that I just want to put on the record? Just for clarity in the transcript, there was testimony at multiple points during this comparing this site to a potential impact like Chick-fil-A. And I just want to be clear, at least in my estimation, those comparisons are playing no role whatsoever in my vote. I don't think that it actually is a fair comparison. I think Chick-fil-A is a much different animal, no pun intended. And I just want to say for the record, I'm discounting those comparisons completely, and my evaluation is being made based on documents actually in the record and testimony in the record, that testimony which actually is factual in its basis.
Yeah, and specific to this application, not another application in another town.
Correct.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think, what was interesting to me about Chick-fil-A was really more to the point of there was a traffic study done for that application. And yes, times have changed, and yes, COVID happened, but it's traffic studies can be inaccurate. And that's really what I was trying to get the traffic
Yeah, no,
consultant. So I think that there's, okay, so with that,
Wait,
I'm
and I'd
making
like to
my-
go on the record and say clearly there's a demand for good chicken in this area. So I have that concern on the record.
okay. All right, so I'll go ahead and make a motion to deny this as a suitable location for a gas station pursuant to our authority under Connecticut General Statutes 14-321 with the standard of review as provided by the applicant. As far as the application for the variance, I think, I did not find a hardship here. I honestly didn't. I didn't see that there was a hardship. I didn't think, to me, the taking by the state was not material enough to impact this site to where they didn't have any other location, any other viable location to put the sign with the gasoline prices. And that's really what the variance was for. It was to put the gasoline prices next to the road. And I just didn't see, a hardship. I mean, they could put a nice, reasonable sign there, the monument sign that Jeff suggested, that would alert people to their location. And that's what we approved signage for. When we looked at Shake Shack, we approved a variance for the signage because, they wanted people to know where their location was. And so, they had the opportunity to do that in this application. Kevin knows the standard better than I do, so I'll ask him to chime in with the minimum adjustment, et cetera. But my opinion on that is that I just didn't find the applicant's arguments compelling. And Kevin, do you want to just go through the legal standard on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just in the most general sense, the standard that we're charged with looking at is there something peculiar about, but in this case, the land, that if we strictly apply the zoning code would lead to, would deprive the applicant of substantial justice in the use of their land, is the standard. So A, is there something peculiar about it that's basically unusual in the neighborhood? And if there is, and we don't allow them if we require strict compliance with code, are they deprived of substantial justice? So my view is there may be something peculiar. I haven't studied enough to know whether there's anything else in the area that there's a portion taken by the highway entrance ramp, but I think that taking is so minimal compared to the size of the property that they're not in fact deprived of the substantial justice in the use of their property. Said differently, there is something unique to their land possibly, but I don't think it creates such a hardship that they're deprived from using their land in a reasonable way.
Yeah, and I think that became obvious with your suggestion of reduction of the number of pumps or limitation of the use. I mean, the only variance that I thought was somewhat viable would be the height variance for the sign, but that's really difficult to evaluate because we weren't seeing, a conforming size. So you wouldn't even know what the sign would look like at that point. So, I think it's difficult. But okay, so I would make a motion unless Barb, Jeff, or Dan, you want to make any comments? Okay, I'll make a motion to deny the applicant's variance request for. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to say, you may have been planning on doing this. I would just recommend we do separate motions and separate votes on the location versus the variance questions.
Yeah, okay.
I agree with that.
So the variant, sorry, Kevin, the location of the gas station or location of the sign?
Yes, the suitability. So question one.
You're breaking up.
Gas station. I think we should have a separate motion and vote on that. And one on the variances that.
Okay. I think I got that. So we're going to do a motion on the location, which I think I've made a motion to deny it. And that was, again, pursuant to our statutory authority and the standard of review. All in favor?
I'll second that motion.
Sorry, Jeff, thank you for
Was it a
seconding.
second?
Thank you, Jeff.
I'm in favor of denying.
I'm in
Okay.
favor of denying.
Okay, and then
Me too.
That's 5-0, Woody.
does someone have? Woody, do you have the legal notice? I just want to get the
Yes.
The language right, yeah.
Oh,
It's like in the first inch of our stack, I think.
like I said, my standard things got
Me,
so here.
I can read the
Okay,
highlight of what the signage variances are to allow the installation of a monument sign with fuel pricing on it. Also has some area and the installation of a front wall sign. Both of those, the monument and the wall sign, have the figure 7s with variances. So not to get into the detailed mumbo jumbo, but that's basically it. Variances for a monument sign and variances for a wall sign.
okay. And the variance for the monument sign though is just to have the gas pricing on there and the size of the logo.
No, not really. The size of the monument, the size of the monument exceeds our allowable square footage because they have the fuel price in it also. They could delete the fuel price, you could deny that. They could still build a monument sign out there, but it would just be smaller. And they'd have to redesign their 7 logo to a smaller configuration. So they do have options, but
Okay. So I'll make a motion to deny their variance request for the monument sign for the reasons stated before in our deliberations. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Barb, all in favor?
I'm in favor.
Okay. And then Woody, the other variance request was for the height and size of the sign on the building?
correct.
Okay. And I'll also, for the reasons stated in our deliberations, I'll also make a motion to deny those variance requests. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Barb, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, on to, I'm
My
much better.
quick question, if 7-Eleven wanted to reapply, let's say they wanted to change the use for the space, there's a 6-month waiting period for reapplication?
I believe that's correct, right, Woody?
Well, they would need to wait 6 months to apply for the same variances. I don't know what they do about the location approval. If they still want to have a gas station there, I think there's quite a problem. But if they wanted to delete the gas station issue and just build a convenience store, there's quite a few options that they have.
Okay. I'm much better working out of my office, I've decided. Okay. This is application 1/2021. The applicant has withdrawn their request for a variance for the covered porch and is proceeding on their variance for the additional third floor space on the property. I struggle with this application a little bit, only because it almost feels like a self-created hardship, even though it wasn't these owners. But I'm happy to listen to your thoughts and your thinking on it.
Sure. I mean, taking out the porch, so put that to a side. I mean, if the question was purely, is there something peculiar about this land and they've been deprived of the substantial justice in the use of their land, my answer would be no. Having said that, there is case law that allows us to put aside that standard in certain situations. One of those situations is if there's a safety concern, which is why we have the ability to allow covered porches even without hardship. But another reason or way we can get away from that strict application of that standard is if the applicant is reducing the nonconformance in a specific area. And I believe the testimony was, and it's credible, and I don't have any reason to disbelieve it, was that if we're looking at just their current application before us, they want to take off that overhang and they want to pitch up the roof. And the impact of that is to reduce the nonconformance. And so for that reason, I'd be comfortable supporting this. Again, not because I don't believe there's a hardship, but because they're reducing nonconformance.
Okay.
I agree. And I love the design. Come on. I mean, what are they going to do? It looks great. Also, I think it's in keeping with the neighborhood. And I think if they'd left the porch on, I would have struggled with this, but I think the hardship is clear enough. And I'm great with the rest of it. I'd love to see them reduce the porch a bit, but we'll see what they come back with.
Jeff, Dan?
Yeah, same. I think, reducing the non-conformity and also the historical nature of the site and the house, how it got moved about, proximity to the street or to the road. And, I think overall they're reducing the non-conformity. So I'm in favor of it.
Mr.
Jeff?
Chairman, I'm not sure about the reducing the nonconformity now. Because if I understood it, they're going to keep the funky, what do they call it, cheek overhang or something?
Yeah, that was my suggestion. We can just put it in the stipulation that they have to remove it to reduce the nonconformity. And then if they come back on the porch, we can look at that as Kevin pointed out as a safety issue. So the reduced nonconformity would be the basis for granting the variance for the attic space, and they've got to come up with a compelling argument for the safety issue and why they need a larger than what we've traditionally deemed to be a safe porch. And that reasoning, I don't know if the applicant is still on, but when you talk to them, Woody, that reasoning can't be because it looks pretty. And I know, Barb, that makes you not happy, but that's the reality of granting a variance. It can't just be because it looks better.
I so struggle with that as a realtor. I so struggle, but yes, I hear you.
I get it, but it's it's standard we're held to, and so and it can't be because it costs more, and it can't be because it's got to be a real hardship or another reduction in nonconformity. I mean, if they looked at removing that bump out on the front of the house, that's a reduction of a nonconformity, and it is an entirely weird structure on the front of their poor house. So they've got to get creative.
I agree.
That's the applicant's job, not ours.
Hey, let me mention quickly, if you wanted to go to a different standard on porch sizes, we could certainly look at that as staff. Take some photos of porches that are 16 feet wide, like this one was proposed, or 6 feet deep. In other words, the 5 feet by 8 foot standard. There were reasons that we came up with that years ago.
Yep.
Well, you can always modify the practice in the future if things change and you feel it should be bigger or more proportional to whatever. I don't know.
But I'm not sure we're talking about a more universal change here in so much as we're talking about they have this somewhat unique bump out window right next to their off-centered front door, and whether that is enough of a reason to justify doing something a little bit more than 5 by 8.
That's why I like having Mr. Fullington here. He makes my job much easier. Okay, Woody, anything you, or sorry, board, anything you wish to add on on this application?
Yeah, I will add this. I must say that in all my time on this board, I don't think that I've ever disagreed with the majority of the board. I'm not sure that I agree with Kevin relative to its self-created hardship, even though they were not the offending party that placed the house in the wrong location. I mean, I'm looking at the site plan, and you know, there's plenty of room to move that house to have placed that house further back inside the buildable area. And furthermore, you know, I was the one years ago that always was the proponent of safety and created the idea of, you know, we need to have covered porches because of the safety issue. And then it became such common practice that we finally said, okay, fine, 5x8 standard. Okay, you don't need to come in if it meets, you know, we can do that administratively. Is the porch too, well, they withdrawn the porch, so it is what it is. But I think there's substantial hardship here, and then I'm surprised that I'm on the boat alone here, but that's okay.
Well, I think the other issue, though, you know, I would be more in your camp on that if this board hadn't granted this property a variance previously to keep that structure. Right? I mean, we basically said, okay, you screwed up, you can keep it. And now they're saying, hey, can we put a third story on it, which is allowable as of right if this was in, you know, in a conforming location. So I mean, I'm sort of compelled by Kevin's argument. I think the reduction in nonconformity, Woody, has to be part of their application, even though I told them to take it out. You know, that was a slip on my part. So, you know, they've got to do that as part of their application, and you need clarity on exactly what parts of the structure. So, you know, I don't know how we've done that in the past. I think there's probably some stipulations that we have.
Yeah, we have some language on preservation. I think it was a little shaky what was represented here as far as what they're preserving. And I think I heard the second floor would remain and all the walls would remain, just the roof would come off. I think we'd have to clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And if this turns into, you know, a bigger project, I'm going to jump into Jeff Williams' camp, and we're going to tell them that they've got to knock this thing down and build it in a conforming location. I don't want the variance to be an excuse if they're not actually, you know, keeping this house. If they're keeping it and they just want to put the third floor on it, I can get behind it. But, you know, so I think you got to be pretty clear on that as far as the stipulations, Woody, and I'm happy to work on that with you. Okay, with that, I will make a motion to approve the variance as relates to the attic. They've withdrawn the variance as relates to the porch, with the stipulation that they do remove that cheek wall, and with the stipulation that they confirm the amount of the structure that will remain, including foundation. It was my understanding that all of the exterior walls of the first floor would remain and that the second floor would remain as is. Woody, if that's not the case, then they're going to need to come back and talk to us. Do I have a second for that? Kevin seconds. All in favor? Okay. Good. Only 3 hours. So that concludes our deliberations and decisions. Thank you guys for attending. Woody, we've got a couple of approvals which we can blow through, and we've got this requested 12-month extension. Can you just tell me about that?
Yeah, we're getting quite a few of these now. We just got another one today. People that have had difficulty getting their project started. because of the COVID. There is some allowance in the governor's orders that I'm still not certain of, but I think to be clean, we've just asked you guys to approve extensions, and this is another one of those that like 12 months in there.
Yeah, I have no issue with that. I mean, COVID, despite what some people might say, COVID is a real thing, and you know, it's impacting people's lives and their ability to do work. And so I have no issue with the 12-month extension to let these people get their project going. So I'll make a motion to approve that 12-month extension. Do I have a second? Jeff, seconds. All in favor? 5-0, Woody. And then, Woody, you sent us December 16th and January 20th minutes, correct?
Yeah, quite a while ago, yes.
Yeah, and I think I saw a pretty long email chain of everyone approving them. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the December 16th minutes. Do I have a second? Dan?
It'd be good to have Dan or Jeff join you, yes.
Dan's joining, and all in favor? You got Dan, Jeff, and I. And then approval of the January 20th, 2021 minutes. That was the same group. I'll make a motion to approve. I've got a second from Barb. All in favor? Okay. Anything else that we need to concern ourselves with tonight, or can Jeff and I go grab a cocktail?
Thank you.
We're good?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Woody. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Have a great night, everyone. Oh, second.
Thanks, guys.